Well, hello everyone, and happy Friday once again, and the last Friday of the month of May, which is hard to believe. I hope you've all had a great week and have a great weekend now as well. I've entitled this devotional today, Being in Last Place, and in honor of that, I'm wearing my Detroit Lions sweatshirt right now. As you may know, I grew up in Michigan, not too far from Detroit, and so I've always been a Lions football fan. And not a bandwagon fan. I was faithful and stuck with them even through some of their very tough seasons, which unfortunately for the Lions was all of their seasons. In fact, somebody told me recently that wearing a Lions sweatshirt like this is actually the best thing to wear during a pandemic, because by wearing this, I'm at least guaranteed not to catch anything, which I thought was pretty clever. Those of you that are football fans would probably know this already. But back in 2008, so about 12 years ago, the Lions made a new league record by becoming the only team, at least to that point, to go 0-16 for the whole season. They never won even a single game. They lost all of their 16 games that year. And as a fan, it was a very tough season. Of course, no one ever wants to be in last place in sports or in any other area of life. And yet, and this is where I get to the serious part of the video, in Mark chapter 9, Jesus tells us as his followers that we should be seeking to be in last place. But of course, he's talking about something quite a bit different than sports. So in Mark chapter 9, verse 33, it says this, "And they," that is Jesus and the disciples, "came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, 'What were you discussing on the way?' But they kept silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest." At the beginning of the chapter 9, only three of the 12 disciples had been taken up to a high mountain by Jesus to witness his transfiguration. It would have been an amazing privilege to see that, to be there, but afterwards they were told not to speak of it. And yet, I tend to suspect that maybe one of them, maybe Peter, may have said something to the others, which of course would have sparked a debate about why or who was the greatest of the disciples. And so then in response to that, Jesus says to them in verse 35, "And he sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, 'If anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all.'" In other words, being in last place, biblically speaking, means simply thinking of everyone else as more significant than yourself, and then serving them. In another similar passage, the Apostle Paul tells us in Philippians chapter 2, I think it's verse 3, where he says, "In humility count others or consider others as more significant than yourself." That is what it means to be in last place. It's that simple, and yet it's so difficult to actually live that way, to truly have that sort of humility. But I pray that the Lord will help me, the Lord will help all of us to live with that sort of Christ-like humility and love for each other, that we genuinely consider others as more significant than ourselves, that we would be last of all and servant of all. Hope you have a great weekend. God bless you.